Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this think tank. I invited you to discuss with me while I present some facts of things that are happening within our country, America, and of course, it's going to start happening around the world. These are times that many of us have sensed within ourselves that we're coming, and now it is here. So, what we have to do is come together and have a peaceful dialogue and reach an understanding of each other in order to really reach peaceful compromise within this situation. And before I start, I want to say two things. The first is that I have learned that Jay Shetty, one of the motivational speakers who has been on Ellen DeGeneres and has had dinner with presidential, basically speech writers. They write speeches for presidents. He shared some information with Russell Brand saying that he recently had dinner with somebody that prepares the speeches for presidents and is very involved in politics. And what he said is that he does not believe that reformation or change will come through government or new policies, but will be actually established through a spiritual awakening. And so that is coming from somebody that has real experience working within the government. And he said he was sad to hear that because he believes very much in the government and in the politics that he often defends. But he shared that it is going to be a spiritual awakening that is going to really bring forth the change on earth that many of us are hoping for. So keep that in mind. The next thing I want to talk about is the defund the police idea. If you are not aware of it, it has already begun. Since protests across the country, some activists are calling to defund the police and redirect those funds to other areas such as education and healthcare, arguing that police reform is not enough. Okay, so what has started to happen now is that some politicians are listening. The Los Angeles Police Department was set to receive a large increase in its annual budget from 1.189 billion last year, and they are going to have that cut slashed. They're calling for a $1 billion cut in New York by from a $6 billion budget over the next 4 years to help fund other programs. So we're seeing that the defunding the police is meant to almost be a punishment, but not seen as a punishment, but to take that money and instead of giving it to the police system in order to increase their local police force, to give to these other programs that are going to help different communities within the cities. And the key factor here is that despite using the defund police phrase, most activists don't want to reduce appropriations to police departments to $0, which is impractical. Instead, supporters of the movement hope to reduce the responsibilities we ask of police and redirect funds to other social programs. For hundreds of years, Black communities have lived under state terror, be it police or vigilante violence. And this is by the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, Patrisse Cullors. And this is from the actual Forbes online article, so you could read it yourself. So this is what we are dealing with right now. And what I have done is over the past 2 weeks or so, I have actually asked around and have gotten information from those that have either tested for to become a police officer or those that know of the police officer exams. The reason why I have done this is because psychology is related to spiritual development and spiritual awakening. So these psych exams, although we cannot test necessarily spiritual consciousness awakening, we can certainly look at the psych evaluations and these types of tests and see how they are testing. What are they testing? And I have an example of it that I will be going through with you today. So we can take a look at that together. So what I have found through asking around is that the police exam questions are really based on the Big Five personality test. So this is something that you will see in your other interviews for other corporations that you might want to get a job at. And through police forums that I sneakily listened in on the conversation with, I found the actual questions that come from the MMPI, which are questions that are actually used for the FBI, for all sorts of law enforcement officers that are wishing to get a job. So the way that we need to look at this is to understand what is the source of both the fear coming from police, the racial prejudice coming from police officers, and what is happening in order to cause these deaths of these innocent people in terms of they are unarmed and they are considered now homicides. How can we look at this from a very logical standpoint, but from a spiritual perspective? And that's what I'm interested in doing with you all today. I have found out that my husband actually, once upon a time before he met me, he wanted to go into the police force. So he's a very protective type of character. And so he told me what was on the exam. So what he said was that the way that they test for racial bias right now, or if you have any type of prejudices, they test on situational questions. And the example is this: they give characteristics of a suspect, perpetrator in a situation that a policeman would be called to. And they take into consideration whether you name first skin color, age, height, or weight, or other types of physical descriptions of a person. Depending on these answers, they take into consideration, along with 800 questions of multiple choice of personality questions that determine whether someone is normal. So what it does is it shows the outliers within society on this psych test, and we are going to look at it, and it is quite wild when you look at the questions. But me being psychic and coming from a spiritual perspective, I will say that they're missing the mark in some places, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'll show you right now the psych test. Are you excited here? So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I do this right. I'm going to share the entire screen with you all so you can see this. So you're going to see me still here. And we're going to go to the practice. Here it is. So this is what they use: the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory test. This is a practice test, so that's why it's number 2. They use number 1. And what I found through the police forums is that this is, like I said, being used in the FBI as well. So we're not going to go through all of this because, as you can see, there is quite a lot of questions, 567 here as a practice test. But we will go over some of the questions. I actually noted a few, but we'll start off with a few here. I like mechanics magazines. I have a good appetite. I wake up fresh and rested most mornings. I think I would enjoy the work of a librarian. I'm easily awakened by noise. My father is a good man, or if your father is dead, my father was a good man. I like to read newspaper articles on crime. My hands and feet are usually warm enough. My daily life is full of things that keep me interested. Now, those seem pretty normal, but here's where it gets very interesting. At question 13, People should try to understand their dreams and be guided by or take warning from them. Okay, so we have a little bit of an interesting question here that prompts officers to think maybe differently than what they would normally do on a job that requires them to enforce the law. But we keep on going, and at number 24, evil spirits possess me at times. Very interesting. So what they are testing for is your normalcy, meaning like how normal are you? They really want level-headed people that to them do not hear voices, do not have odd experiences. And so they are testing for that. If we go to 32, I find it hard to keep my mind on a task or job. Actually, that's, I'm sorry. I have had very peculiar and strange experiences. So that's another question where they're trying to find out how odd of a life experience have you had, and then we go to number 58. I think a great many people exaggerate their misfortunes in order to gain the sympathy and help of others. Okay, so now we're starting to test a little bit of your emotional response to people. But although there's a lot of questions about pain in regards to I hardly ever feel pain in the back of my neck. They also ask in another question about tingly sensations. Also 47, I'm almost never bothered by pains over my heart or in my chest. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to see if you're normal, if you have relatively normal experiences that are not supernatural. And also they're trying to see if you are in some type of health and in shape where you don't experience constant pain that might stop you from doing your job. So they're testing to see the outliers in society. They don't want the people that, are the hermits or the weirdos or people that they would consider to be unrelatable to be part of the police force. And within this test are questions about extrasensory perceptions and abilities. And we'll get more into that. 58, so we talked about that. 60, when I am with people, I am bothered by hearing very strange things. So this is an odd question because it's very open-ended. Are they hearing strange things that don't come from others? Or are they experiencing discomfort when people talk about strange things? This is a very interesting loaded question here. 72, my soul sometimes leaves my body. Okay, so we can look at this in many different ways. And you're supposed to answer, once again, a false or a true to that question. So either you believe, yes, my soul sometimes leaves my body, or you don't. Very odd to have on a police exam, and I'm not sure where it helps other than trying to figure out who has strange, phenomenal type of experiences within their life that they might consider to be maybe a detriment to being able to do police work. Number 96, I see things or animals or people around me that others do not see. Okay, so if you ever have claimed that you have seen fairies or any type of spirits or energies, if you put down true, that would show you as an outlier in society. You probably might not score high if you keep on putting true within these tests. I'm going to keep going here. So that was 89. This here, my hardest battles are with myself. So now we get to a very spiritual question, I believe, because it's about inward looking, inward gazing, and not putting and placing the blame on others, but you're actually taking responsibility within your life. So that's a very interesting question I wanted to point out. 113, I know who is responsible for most of my troubles. Now, this is very open-ended. Are you blaming others for your troubles within your life, or are you taking personal responsibility to see that Maybe you are responsible for your troubles. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can answer that, but once again, it's only true and false. And then we have, after that, 119, we have the, oh, this was very interesting to put on this test. I like collecting flowers or growing houseplants. Now, I'm curious to see if you put true as a police officer, what that would do to your score. Are they looking for a conscientious nature towards nature, other living things, taking care of plants, which has been evidenced of showing a form of empathy or caring nature when you're taking care of animals or plants? Or are they thinking that it's kind of strange for a police officer to maybe fill their life with taking care of houseplants? So this is an interesting question. The other one I wanted to talk about was 199, which is here. I like science. And also, I often hear voices without knowing where they come from. Okay, so these two questions here are very interesting for a police officer, especially the often hear voices without knowing where they come from. Once again, this is a psychic evaluation, so they're trying to see if you have any type of mental illnesses or any situations where, you know, it might be a problem being a police officer. However, these tests are not open-ended enough for you to really explain yourself. So what I have heard through the police forums, and I will stop sharing here, you could actually score yourself on this sample test if you ever want to take it. I'm going to stop sharing here though and come back. But here's the thing about that is that the problem is that they're not able to really expand on those questions, but it's only true or false. So can you see the issues where it might cause those that maybe would be very good for police work to not get hired based on that psych evaluation test? Now, I have another thing I wanted to show you, because based on this idea, looking at the idea of the test that they give you, and if you want to do it yourself, you can definitely look online and you can find this test to take. I paid like $3.99. So you can do it yourself if you're interested, but I did it just to go over this with you all so that you have full knowledge about what's happening within the police force and how we can move on from here. What is the next steps? So with that being said, that is not taking into consideration the idea of empaths and highly sensitive people, which I am one. So I would like to discuss this today. This is a part of the quiz that I believe that should be included, because if you are a highly sensitive person, what it actually means is that you're sensitive to energies that are unseen. And that does not necessarily mean that you would be a bad cop. And in fact, I have arguments today to provide the idea that actually it would make you maybe a better cop. And possibly all police officers should be somewhat tested for a skill of empathy, a skill of having a highly sensitive sensory system within themselves so that they can gauge certain situations and not use excessive force for no reason when there is no need to. Police officers in general need to become better readers of people. If they are in service to the public and are working to be a service to others, then they need to formulate and cultivate this ability of understanding people better. And I think that this is the next step that we're going to see police reform. It is through a spiritual evolution And yes, it will be done through some policies, and there might be some change with defunding the police, but truly it's going to start here, because we are all people within a collective working together. And we have to look at the core, and what's the core is the emotional response to one another based on our subjective experiences and how we perceive things. So the highly sensitive person, these are questions that can actually gauge whether a police officer is not necessarily not normal, because they experience perception of things that other people cannot see, but it rates whether you have a highly sensitive system to perceive those things. So it asks questions like, I am easily overwhelmed by strong sensory input. I seem to be aware of subtleties in my environment. Other people's moods affect me. I tend to be very sensitive to pain. I find myself needing to withdraw during busy days into bed or even a darkened room or any place where I can have some privacy and relief from stimulation. I'm particularly sensitive to the effects of caffeine. I'm easily overwhelmed by things like bright lights or strong smells, coarse fabrics, sirens close by. I have a rich, complex inner life. I'm made uncomfortable by loud noises. I'm deeply moved by the arts or music. My nervous system sometimes feels frazzled that I just have to go off by myself. I'm conscientious. I startle easily. I'm rattled when I have a lot to do in a short amount of time. Okay, so these questions can be formulated to fit the police force. But what I am getting at is that Dr. Elaine Aron, she is the actual doctor of psychology that actually developed this idea. And the highly sensitive person is a real thing that is now part of psychology, and it is noted within the animal kingdom as certain animals have a higher degree of sensitivity than others. And this is something that we actually see in humans. Some humans actually were born with highly sensitive systems that allow them to perceive things that others cannot. They would be the psychics, the empaths, the highly perceptives within our society. And what I suggest is that we use them as tools, basically. We use these people within our societal systems in a better way. What I wanted to share with you is this. Psychics and empaths are the untapped potential within society systems such as government, police, and judicial systems. There needs to be a large-scale spiritual update to society. And this is, I think, the seed of where it can start. Words by Nancy Du Tertry, who is a trained detective psychic and an author of Psychic Intuition, Everything You Wanted to Ask But Were Afraid to Know. So I read an article that she wrote based on police and psychics, and it is true. Police do use psychics. However, this is what she said. Several years ago, a retired New Jersey police chief told me this story. He had gone to a public convention where there were several hundred police officers in attendance. The speaker came out on stage and asked for a showing of hands for how many police officers have worked with a psychic. Almost everyone in the audience raised their hands. So almost every police officer in a room full of 100 police officers have used a psychic to help them crack a case, to close a case. But then he asked how many would even admit to it or ever admit to it publicly, and only 2 or 3 hands in the room went up. To me, this indicates the existence of a problem in law enforcement that needs to be resolved once and for all. It is time to stop being embarrassed about working with a psychic detective. And this suggests a much bigger problem within society that I'm going to be getting into. This suggests that the study of spiritual science is not fully believed nor accepted but may be used sometimes when it is convenient or when they feel that it is a last resort. Psychics are only called in as a last resort to close cases. Empaths and psychics are readers, and they may need to start to be involved not only in cases to figure out where a murder took place or to get sensory perceptions of something that happened. They actually need to be involved in the hiring process as well to help interviewers get clear readings on potential officers. And here's why, is because those that are empaths, and empathy is a part of psychic ability. It is when you get a sense in the emotional field from others, and you can actually experience the feelings, the thoughts, the intentions of others, and you actually can feel them within yourself and get a more clear reading and understanding of a person. The art of reading people can be used or taught, if possible, where one uses body, facial movements, energetic senses, reading the aura fields of people and seeing where they are consciously by the way they represent themselves outwardly to the world with their words and actions and energy in terms of vibrations and frequencies that they give off. And I have a chart that will show the vibrations and frequencies and the number level of them. Actually, here it is. So I talked about this in another video. This is David Hawkins with his vibrational chart on basically on emotions. So you can see it here. So this was developed by David Hawkins, and he actually worked on Project Y, which is part of the Manhattan Project for nuclear energy. So he was part of this, and he developed a way to actually measure the frequency level or the vibrations that are carried within different emotions within human beings. So as I said on another video about lower beings versus higher beings, it all depends on vibration frequency. This is where empaths come in, and those that are psychic and have certain senses. People who are highly sensitive to energies that are unseen will actually feel these within their body. And what I mean is that psychics will actually get a feeling of either a lower vibration emanating from somebody or a higher vibration coming from somebody, and they will sense it within their body. Now, this is an ability that not everybody has right now. I believe that it is something that is actually available to all humans within the mammalian kingdom, because this is something that is found within the animal kingdom in terms of animals sensing danger before it happens. I don't know if you have ever experienced this, but I have 2 dogs at my house, and whenever my husband and I are ready to fight, because we start to get an argument kind of growing between us, my dog will actually start barking right before I explode in anger or he explodes in anger. They actually can sense the rising of the vibration frequency coming and emitting from me. And this is where we have to get to the truth and no longer be ashamed of this. This is something that cannot be refuted by science any longer. Our world is consisting of vibrations and frequencies and waves and particles. And that is what actually constructs the material world. And you learn this in the basic elemental version of science with what creates a solid matter versus a gas. So we need to understand that these vibrations and frequencies can actually be measured now. They can be felt within those that are sensitive to actually experiencing those energies. And I guess as an empath myself, why I sense lower vibrations, I guess I can explain this, is that if I am someone that might be vibrating at a higher level, like if I'm at love 500, or if I'm at joy 540 or 600 frequency level, and all of a sudden I meet somebody who comes across in my experience who is at pride or anger or desire, they're in these lower vibration frequencies. What it will do is it causes a discord feeling within myself. It actually stops me in my tracks of that high vibrational feeling, and then I feel something is off. Something does not resonate with me. Something does not align to me. We don't have harmony together any longer. We have a discord. So that is how an empath actually can read very correctly and accurately some of the emotional experiences of people when they are getting a read on somebody. So we can start doing that within politics, within government institutions, and within the justice system as well. What I believe is that within the judicial system, we can have empaths put on jury, not just random public, but we can have empaths actually sitting there. We can have those that are empathic that are going to go into the police force, because we measure them for their ability to read others' energies so that they can diffuse the situation, or they can rise to the occasion if they need to. But this is the thing, it's all about reading people. So the psych tests need to determine whether a person has extrasensory abilities by asking questions that pertain to these abilities. Like a question example, have you felt something was off in a situation? And have you ever trusted your intuition? Describe a time, not by true or false, but actually by multiple questions. Describe a time when this occurred and what were the results. These are the types of psych evaluation questions. We can have less of them. They don't need to be 500 true or false multiple choice. They simply have to be real important questions that get to the heart of the matter. Is somebody perceptive enough to be a guardian or a protector within society? Because that, quite honestly, is what you sign up for as a police. And if you don't, then you're in the wrong profession. To be a law enforcer is to take the vow that you're going to protect those who are innocent, and you are going to enforce the law to those that step out of boundaries. Now, on some level, those laws might need to be looked at. What is considered stepping out of boundaries? What's a misdemeanor versus a felony? These are things that we can discuss on a policy level, but on an actual people-to-people level interviewing process, we need police officers that are empathic and that are more aware, full of extrasensory ability to perceive people, to perceive situations, and to know when there is not harm and when there is a reason to be on guard. And that is truly what I have discovered. And the racial bias test, known as the RACE IAT, I put the link in the description, developed by Harvard Psych Department, determines bias towards certain skin colors. Well, guess what? I took it today. And I'm not sure if it is the full picture to a situation, because it is a very strange test where you are clicking E or I, matching words and faces to good or bad. So it's about testing your response and your reaction time to white faces and darker faces, or lighter faces and darker faces, and then also attributing certain words with those responses. And that to me is really counterproductive on getting to the heart of the matter. Is somebody actually truly highly perceptive? Do they understand people more? And this is something that is more about intrapersonal skills and abilities, and also intrapersonal too, because you're looking inward as well as able to understand and read people better. So I did take that test. I would say that it is a start. 57% of the police departments within our country use that racial bias test already, but there's a whole half of them that do not include that. There is a petition. If you are interested in starting that, you can sign your name and make sure that all police stations use this in their interviewing process. But maybe I'll start a petition on the highly sensitive person, because I do feel that this is another part of psychic evaluations that they should bring in. This, I believe, is the puzzle piece that is missing. This is the ability, born or cultivated through life experience, to read energy fields of these vibrations and frequencies that create our world collective and that emanate from others. And you can read it versus a low vibration versus a high. And those that are sensitive to energy, they will actually feel it within themselves and get a feeling like, ooh, I don't want to talk to this person. Ooh, this person I really resonate with. I really vibe with them. That's because they are in harmony with your higher vibrations. They are not throwing in that discord note to your higher vibrations and interrupting your sense of peace and happiness. So the new perspective on empaths, or extrasensory perceptions, is that it is a natural gift seen within the animal kingdom, evidenced by animals sensing danger before it occurs. And number two, it is a collaborative approach to working with those in society with these gifts. No longer should psychics be designated to tarot card readings and make their money through that. No longer should those who are empaths or those with extrasensory abilities be seen as an outlier or something is strange about them. Maybe they are perceiving something that others cannot. And we need to focus on those that have this ability and this gift. And we need to collaborate with these people within our social organizations that deals with service to the people, such as government, judicial system, and the police law enforcement. It is vital to have a spiritual component now when we are dealing with the people, because the collective is awakening. And no longer can we have systems that don't align to this consciousness awakening happening. A global awareness or understanding of the quantum world of vibrations and frequencies that form our material world, coming from both the individual mind as well as the collective mind, is important. Everybody needs to have that in their education. It should be taught in schools at a younger age. It should be something that everybody gets involved with understanding. And I don't think that it is a hobby any longer. I think that it is vital to humanity evolving and seeing this species become truly an advanced spiritual species that the human being was always destined to become. No more shame to use these gifts and abilities of others or to bring them out more openly within yourself. You should not be shamed or feel ashamed of having these higher perceptions and these phenomenal experiences within your life. Now, there's a difference between those that are actually truly somebody that has maybe a mental illness that they would have to receive help for. I'm not saying that we get rid of that field of help for people or healing for people, but I'm suggesting that we might need to take a look at those questions that ask about seeing things or having spiritual experiences and not seeing it as not being normal. Because even though it might be an outlier position, it might be seen as not normal, it is slowly becoming the norm. Why? Because we are all spiritual beings having a material experience on this planet, and many of us are awakening up to that fact. And I'll say this, I think police officers, the ones that are highly perceptive, the ones that can diffuse a situation, that have been good protectors and law enforcers based on the reading of people and understanding when something is a real threat and when you're helping a kitten out of a tree, or when you're just helping a drunk person find their way back home without shooting them in the back dead, like Rayshard, Brooks, which is unfortunate, which happened. Now, the resisting arrest is something that causes a complication within the situation. We do know that. But the idea of having a weapon while someone else does not and is unarmed, and the shooting in the back is very much an evidence of over excessive force, of use of violence within this situation with Rayshard Brooks. And you can actually watch the video. I watched all 45 minutes of it up to the confrontation between the police officers and him being shot. So it's a very eye-opening experience to watch that unfold. And I do recommend that if you want to learn more about what is happening, so that you really have true clarity on the situation before you form an opinion. And I would say that it is okay for police officers that are highly perceptive and that can diffuse escalated situations and have done so. I congratulate you, and I say that it's okay and it is wonderful to be a highly sensitive person within this type of police work or this type of service to the public. It is more than okay to admit that you are a highly perceptive person. And this is a gift or an ability that we need to start to see as something that is needed within these types of societal systems. So test for these qualities before forming a street army of local officers, and then they will be able to read situations more clearly. And that, I have racked my mind to what I feel is the core problem of this situation. And coming from a spiritual perspective, I cannot control the spiritual experience of everyone, and I wouldn't want to. I don't think that we can as people. I think we all have our own unique soul journeys to go on. We all have our own types of awakenings that we experience. But I do think that we can move as a collective in terms of understanding the energetic world and no longer looking at only the material world and seeing those that might have experience of the energetic world through an extrasensory process as weird or strange or not normal. I think that this has to become actually the new normal. And I think that more people need to awaken to this ability. And then we can bring it back into the center once again, where we become balanced with having a good grasp on the material world and accepting evidence in front of us in a logical way. But then we also have this sixth sense, this intuitive understanding and feeling that we cultivate and we grow within us that allows us to read each other better, more clear, with a clearer defined lens that is really focused on your spiritual consciousness and your sense of unity with others. So I can't say that we can start forcing police officers to not be racist or to have unity consciousness towards their fellow brothers and sisters. Many of them do. And I think that that is something that we need to look at as well, to see the positive light. I have had some messages from people saying that they've had some concern about this defund the police and police reform because police officers have actually saved their lives in times of need. And I have a personal story with that too. But I do know that there is an opposite experience where there are police officers that are too trigger happy. They're too fearful. They're not really prepared for this type of work. They have not cultivated the abilities to perceive situations on a deeper level. And quite possibly, they don't have a spiritual understanding of what's really going on and how to diffuse situations coming from that spiritual perspective, a higher perspective. In many ways, police officers need a higher perspective now. As the collective is gaining higher perspective, police officers, judicial systems, government systems, with our politicians need a higher perspective. And that incorporates the energetic world, which we know as a spiritual one, because we experience the energetic world as a spiritual experience that sometimes is hard to convey, but we feel it very deep inside and we can't prove it to others, but it is our own. But there are ways that we actually can test for this ability. And so this is going to be the exciting new phase. How do we test for the ability of actually being truthfully honest in these extrasensory gifts? So this is a puzzle that is probably next to figure out. How do we define these tests? I think the highly sensitive person is a very good start. But how do we even go to the next level of that and look at these abilities, a higher perception as a gift, and wanting those people to work within the systems as a collaboration with those that are in service to the public? And like I said, no longer do empaths or psychics just be designated to making money from tarot readings or doing energy readings for people and helping people heal emotionally and spiritually, but they can become part of our systematic systems within our world society and actually can form a council, as advisors or guides in many ways. And I do believe that that is the future that we will see, is that a council, a true council within this world to provide real guidance to the public will have to have those that have some type of spiritual understanding and that do come from a spiritual perspective. That is very much needed. And we do see that within politicians. Many of us that are deeply spiritual, highly perceptive, all that deep inside, you are craving for a politician to be the same way. And that is what our world is waiting for. We have these next steps to move towards. And I believe that we can start with these types of psychic evaluations that really promote the positive qualities, bringing forward these attributes as gifts, not that you're not normal. So I'm done. I want to go to the questions and thoughts, and we can come up with some ideas together. So Samantha Lewis, when did this start? It started at 8. So hopefully that is it. Naren, defund doesn't mean completely abolish. Exactly. And that's what I wanted to read in the very beginning, is that most of those calling for some kind of reform or defunding, they do not want to take all the money. But I think what they're trying to say, and it is a form of punishment in a way, but they're really trying to say that we should not give the police departments all this money, and yet they're not really doing their job. Some of them are not doing their job fully. Maybe it will cut down on the police force. So it might start people, the firing process of those that have maybe had a lot of mistakes within the public arena. And so, this is definitely a process that is happening, whether people realize it or not, or want it or not. The people have spoken. And whether you agree with it or not, this is about you stepping outside of your personal experience and seeing the experience of others and just kind of listening in right now. That's kind of what I'm doing, as I'm trying to observe all the perspectives coming from the other sides. I actually do not believe that this is a conspiracy. I believe that this is a consequence of a historical, basically an agenda, a history that we have had for a very long time in terms of different color skins, and we've had segregation within our country. And America is just really kind of reaping right now what has been sowed. These are the fruits of those seeds that were planted. And what we are discovering is that we have made a lot of movement forwards. I want to say that I've watched, the live footage of Selma, and I have watched Blacks and whites together marching, and I have seen it, and I have participated in these peaceful walks as well. There is a beautiful progress that is happening that is related to the spiritual consciousness awakening within the collective. However, there are still those that have been untouched. They have been unmoved. Part of it is from family bloodline, the way that you grow up and what you are taught growing up. Part of it is just ingrained ideas and opinions that are not based on true experience of the other person. So it comes from a state of ignorance. Racial prejudice, or prejudice in general, comes from a state of ignorance because you do not have a friend that actually can show you the opposite of your stereotype or your judgment, and that's what it comes down to, is having friends of other colors, having friends of other cultures. And this is, the age of Aquarius. All our diversity is going to start to come together in unity, and the people have spoken. Yes. Oh, Buddy Helm, bless all your days. Namaste. Bless all your days as well. And let's see. Naren, you can always just put the right answer on a test like this. You know what's interesting? On the police forum, I was listening to their conversation. I love these public forums that you could just kind of watch and learn what people are speaking about together. And what they said is that, some people think that it's easy because it's based on your personality, so you shouldn't have to study for it. But yet there's all these practice tests because it really makes people nervous. And there have been police officers that have failed. And that comes from looking at those questions that are presented to be like you're not normal in society if you have those experiences. Can you believe some of those questions? Has my soul left my body? Well, what if you had a near-death experience like I have? I actually had a near-death experience where I wouldn't say my soul, I would say my consciousness left my body temporarily and experienced the truth of, what my life is about. And I had a decision to come back. And I stand by that experience. And nobody can say that that is false or not. That's within me. That's my personal truth. And so these tests they seem strange to me. They're counterproductive, or they're at least maybe not getting to the real heart of the matter. Naren, yeah, the fact that there's a practice test is weird to me. I know, right? It's so strange. So someone would answer yes to I have demons in my head makes no sense. Exactly, right? No one would write that while trying to get a police job, even if they did experience this. Well, that's what I guess they're testing for, right? They're testing for almost like a vulnerability, somebody that might have paranormal experiences and be very open about it. My gosh, I would probably flunk that test. Although I think I would make a great detective. But I know that my personal life experiences would betray me in that test. And that's a sad thing. And I think that this is where it's the material world not seeing the spiritual. When I mean material world, are those people that create the public systems that have lived mainly their life by understanding the material world and accepting evidence based on materialism versus also accepting that there can be spiritual experiences that cannot be explained, but that they can truly be felt. And so past these tests, we need to have some type of energy reading happen of police officers. Those that want to be guardians, well, let's test. Are you really truly having the heart of the people? Because that's what you sign up to do. So, I mean, for those that have followed my channel for a while, this is very much connected to the idea of elven guards of Tolkien. If we actually took the mentality of the elves and put their idea of what their army looked like, they're both highly perceptive, sensitive, extrasensory beings, as well as very tough and ready to defend as well. That's what our police system now needs to look like. And yes, this is a challenge. This is a challenge because now we're going to have tests to test both aspects of personalities. I say they should put people on that, have ESP, more empaths. And the government uses psychics. They use remote viewers because they have been using those for a long time to try to get information from other nations. And they have been using them in a very secretive manner. But it's not something that is always used. And this is something that needs to be more of a collaboration in terms of actually employing people in places of power. We need to have empaths within the interviewer process, or interviewers cultivate empathy. So how about this? Before you become a police chief, before you become somebody that has the ability to actually employ others, you need to actually pass the test of empathy. You need to pass the test of highly sensitive person. Can you actually, or at least get close to it, to see how perceptive you are? There needs to be tests of that. And the 5 big personality tests, it tests agreeability, conscientiousness. It tests these types of personal, dispositions of people. But it's not testing your ability to perceive others, your ability to read others, and to actually gain true sense of someone and really be able to reach a soul-to-soul connection with others. It didn't stop sharing. Okay, good. Roxanne, police violence rose when they instituted shoot to kill. When I was young, police would only shoot someone in the leg. Perfectly effective and kept the arrestee alive. Yes. And what's interesting, Roxanne, with Rayshard Brooks on Friday, he was shot, I think, in the leg at first, but he was running away because he was found drunk in a Wendy's parking lot, and they went to go handcuff him after 40 minutes of this horribly complex sobriety test that this poor drunk man could not really understand because he was inebriated. But they tried to handcuff him. He broke out of the handcuff, and they're saying that he went for the taser, but then he ends up running, and they shot him, I think, in the leg, but then also in the back. And you actually hear those shots 3 times. So, guns are being used to stop people in their tracks. And this is a problem. We're not diffusing the situation before it gets to that point. I don't think that guns should be an easy way to stop people. And I know that maybe it's been taught to be a last resort, but I think police officers use it as a crutch because they are fearful in the position. I've actually read on the forums, and I've done some observation that there are many police officers that go to their job fearful of what will happen, because you don't know. You're dealing with other people's personalities, and you're dealing with mainly an unconscious part of the collective that is revolved around crime, and so how do you diffuse that situation? We have some real deep spiritual issues with this, and this is something that we need to come together as a people to discuss. Naren, wow, didn't know they were James Bond. Have a license to kill. Yes, exactly. Right, like how Roxanne said. Yeah. Yeah, the shoot to kill is unbelievable, especially if someone does not have a gun. Rayshard was known to not have a gun. George Floyd, it wasn't about a gun, but when you have an unarmed person, that automatically should relax an officer a bit, in reading the situation, reading that a person doesn't have a gun, doesn't own a gun. And so there's this a judgment and assumptions that are coming that is about generalization, that all people are going to have guns, or, I'm always in, and it's a state of fear. And this is a really sad thing about society. So we need to really have a deeper conversation of really starting to awaken those abilities of having a higher perception that will relax you, because you won't be constantly in a state of fear. You will be able to read when fear is needed. Okay, you'll know when that happens. And then you will also have a sense within you when fear is not needed. And this is something that we should start to really employ in our police officers. Vaughn, I have always wanted to be a detective psychic. It is a real profession. And although the police would, call you as a last resort, it is something that is possible. But it's more like under the cover in terms of it's something that it needs to be part of the system. Like the way that police reformation happens, it actually needs to be an equal part now, is the spiritual aspect, the psychic aspect of solving crimes, of helping to diffuse situations regarding crime. Let's see, more different people here. So, I love this conversation. This is great. Naren, I agree with the spiritual thing with officers. If they exist, they should have empathic ability. They do exist, they do, but I think what now has to happen is an open dialogue of it, and it has to be actually enforced by the police chiefs, by those that create the organized system, within their cities. So this is going to be a long process, but I foresee that we cannot help but go this direction. And the reason is because while the collective is slowly awakening and we are changing, these systems that are created in order to protect the people or to serve the people, they will have to align to the people. So if the collective is updating, getting a consciousness shift, these systems also will have to as well. And I think that this is just physics, the idea of water seeks its own level. We are going to see it happen regardless, although there's going to be kicking and screaming. There's going to be those that are going to think it's ridiculous. They're going to mock it. They're not going to feel that it's valuable. However, this is where we are heading. This is the new age. And people need to awaken to this factor that this is the missing piece. And I've really thought very strongly about this for a while now, but I've gotten very strong messages. And after my observation of the situation for 2 weeks or so, I've been really involved in this way. I've realized that this is something that definitely can help. So I'm happy that a lot of you are agreeing. I knew that many of you would, that do follow my channel. Ashley, very intense, understandable. It can be very highly intense for HSPs. Yes, and so that test might scare off those that are looking for police officers, because you don't want somebody that is going to be too sensitive to sirens, right? So the test needs to be reformulated so that you have strong empaths that can handle, they might feel overwhelmed and they might admit it too, but that they can push through it. And on a spiritual level, their sense of service and duty can get them through that that overwhelming feeling. That is what I do. I get very overwhelmed by being out, in the public and things like that, in terms of exposing myself to overstimulation. But I do it because I do feel a strong sense of service, and I love doing it. And I think that this is where, if police can be seen as both empathic and strong, this is the next step, because highly sensitive person does not mean that you are weak or that you are too sensitive for your job. It means that you have an acute awareness and that you can sense things that others may not notice and that it may not bother them. But we can use those skills, because those are the skills of hearing things stronger. So this is used in crime. Think about the elves, hearing sounds before you see them, very important ability for a cop to have. These are things that really are something that we need to test for, is the extra sensory abilities within our police officer. If we're going to have a guard that is going to stand guard over the public, then this is what happens. Now, the opposite of this idea is the autonomous union, or the nation that is being built right now in Seattle. Many of you may have not heard about this. There is a few blocks that are being actually taken over by demonstrators, by protesters that have claimed it as an autonomous nation. It is a separate nation now that they are claiming to police themselves. They do not want any police in that area. They do not want to be ruled by any of government laws, and they are declaring autonomy. And what they're doing is they're using each other to police themselves. Now, this is a highly utopic idea. And deep inside, my egalitarian self wants the world to get to this place: self-policing and self-governance. However, I am reasonable to understand that we are in a slow start to that, and that we might not be ready to jump to that yet, but we are seeing the seeds of the idea grow, and this is kind of exciting. Although the way it is happening is really upsetting people. They are taking over certain blocks where people live that did not consent to this nation being built. They are basically taking over territory. People have complained. So an autonomous nation absolutely can exist, but it needs to be in a place where people do not live in currently. There needs to be land where they can start to build their autonomous nation that is separate from the United States government. And it is really, that's like the Elven Realms, right? When we talk about J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings as an example of it. I mean, if you want to see it in literature, there it is. However, this is something that it needs to move together with the collective. Otherwise, what you're seeing is you have many people are very upset about this. First of all, they live in those areas. They did not consent, like I said. And at the same time, those that are not part of the nation, the Americans that are right now listening to this on the news and are commenting on YouTube about this in Seattle, are now upset because they are not included. And although it might be something that is open to everybody, I mean, maybe if you left your job, you left your home right now, and you drove to Seattle and you said, hey, I want to join, I'm sure that there might be some open arms, but they are guarding that area right now with armed weapons. This is the world we're living in. So there are very interesting times we are experiencing. We need to do this carefully to ensure that nobody gets hurt in this process. And this is sometimes the problems of anarchy, because anarchy can cause this sense of chaos, which causes fear and disruption to people. And not include everyone within the process. And what ends up happening is you have people that fight against it. So there needs to be more of a harmonious movement. And the only way that I can think about that is really through spiritual awakening and actually enforcing these values within the new police reform, within the new government reformation that will be happening in the future. And these are the ways that we ensure that we have a more accurate system, because what's not accurate is basing your feelings or your thoughts on just your personal feelings and emotions. What is accurate is by sensing the energy within the world and actually noticing when those vibrations of lower or higher quality hit your body and cause a reaction and a response, and you feel it physically. And that's what an empath experiences. They actually experience that within their body. And many people have this ability. All of you have probably had gut feelings, where you just feel like this instinctual pull to not go somewhere, or you feel, maybe you need to stay away from a particular person. So these are these attributes within humankind that can now be cultivated and developed in a way where it's not about hiding it or thinking that it's separate or that it's not needed or not valued. I'm tired of mystics and psychics and empaths and sages and all those that have extrasensory abilities being pushed aside by society and policymakers and those that create our social organizations, thinking that for some reason they're the weirdos, they're the outliers. No, we need to be included now within the system remake so that we can have a more accurate system that bases both sides of the picture of rationality and intuitive wisdom. And this is where, this is really where I see change, is this balance happening. Mary Preston, I've heard these zones are helping people not get hurt by the police and are helping people get free food. Yep. Why would anyone want to get in the way of it? Well, Mary, I have heard the same thing. And, this reminds me of the Black Panthers. I actually have really, I applaud the Black Panthers movement. It was actually a really wonderful movement that had to happen because of the racial prejudice and segregation and all that. And the Black Panthers, what they did was they surrounded themselves with weapons, and they basically just protected the people from the police. And what I know about it is that most of the time it was very peaceful. And there's a saying, I think in Alaska, I heard that those who live in Alaska, because you can carry a gun with you, like in your holster. There's this idea that since everybody knows that everybody carries a gun, they're all polite to one another. So this is that type of mentality that happens when you have a Black Panther movement that is protecting their people. What I have actually seen in documentaries with real footage are these Black Panthers had guns, and they basically brought them out, walked around with them, protecting the neighborhoods. And when the white police would come around, they would just hold those guns, and show that they have the power to protect themselves. So the police brutality cannot happen. And so, that is a way to get that sovereignty, right? Like to actually make a claim for yourself in an autonomy kind of way. And I guess, Mary, what's happening is that what I read in an article was that people were upset that, I guess, this autonomous nation has been created in Seattle where people live, so they hear noises all night. People have put their tents in their front yards or on the street right outside of their house. Think about, I guess, if you lived in apartments down in that area, or you had a store, if you're a store owner and people started to put tents there and claim this is their new space. So many people are feeling a little bit encroached on the territory. I understand, I get that. But yes, you're right. It's about looking at the deeper message here. Is this helping people, or is this something that you have to say, well, oh, you're on my land, oh, it's noisy. And maybe this is something that needs to come together as a compromise. Okay, so autonomous nation of Seattle now, you need to be respective of those on the street, and there needs to be some kind of curfew now where you're quiet at a certain time so that those that did not, accept this as part of their reality are going to now have some type of, harmonious agreement. I mean, these are the dialogues that have to take place, right? So I'm glad you brought that up, because I definitely understand that it is something that it's showing a peaceful perspective of standing up for yourself. And so if you watch the videos on it, it's very interesting. Most of them are just sitting there. They do have armed guards, so there is a concern from the police, but at the same time, nothing is quite happening. There's no shootouts or anything at this point, which is really good, and I do hope that that continues. Ashley, that's wonderful if that's how the zones are being used. Here in Portland, some police ripped apart first aid and supplies for the peaceful protesters. Oh my goodness. Yes, and so right there, are those police officers actually applying empathy? Can they actually read the energy of those that have the supplies to help bandage those that, get into scuffles? I mean, this is where empathy really is the next factor. And I truly do believe it, that we need to really test for these abilities and the ability to perceive when you're working with the public. In Detroit, so this is from Roxanne. In Detroit in the 60s, we also had the White Panthers, and who were friends with the Black Panthers and worked together. I absolutely love that. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. And that's probably what has inspired this autonomous nation now. And, some people can look at it, oh, it's the leftists, the liberals taking over. We need to go deeper into the experience of each other. It's no longer a political thing. And if you want to do your own research about this, I have come to terms to understand that the idea of white privilege is not political. It's not actually attributed to a certain political party, although maybe a certain political party might use the term. It is actually a sociology one. And we need to look at that because that is our history of America. If we have had only 3 to 4 generations of our Black community, of their family experiencing racial segregation or color segregation, whites to Blacks can't use the same bathrooms, had to sit different areas of the bus, could not have the same, it's horrific when you think about it. It is an absolute embarrassment to those that are consciously aware today. But we are not finished correcting these mistakes, and we are seeing this now come to head. All truth comes to surface. And whether you think this is a conspiracy or not, there can be some points where it can be part of conspiracy. We need to be careful with that we don't take sides, political sides and things like that, because that can fuel these conspiracies. But go to the experience of people. I want you to look at, the stories of people within the Black community. I want you to listen to those that are from those 3 to 4 generations back to describe their experience. And that's why I watched a lot of documentaries over these last 2 weeks. I really wanted to understand this experience. And I understand it, I understand it. And this is something that I see. I can also understand and appreciate the police side as well, that police also are trying to do their job, and that there are many of them that do have good intentions. They are perceptive in order to do a good job and keep people safe and lock away those that cannot, fit into society right now. And I have another video about, prison reform, because that needs a change too. We need to have more of a spiritual understanding of prisoners. We need to help them redeem themselves spiritually, and maybe it doesn't have to come from religion, but more from a sense of psychology. Great movie I just saw, Brian Banks. Wonderful movie about a man that was wrongly accused of something he did not do when he was 16, spent 6 years in jail, and Morgan Freeman plays an inspiring character who taught him almost like Gnostic ideas, but they're more spiritual, in the idea of freeing yourself from the material world and understanding that while you might be in prison, your mind can be free. So these are the types of spiritual, programs that can really help reform a person. And it helped reform him. Although he was completely innocent, he was full of very much a lot of anger and a lot of hopelessness. We need to look at each other as souls that relate to us, because there is an interconnection that we are moving towards understanding and awakening to. And I really do believe that. Mary Preston, maybe the people in apartments can hang out with the people in the streets, and they can start hanging out to become friends and work together. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would come down from my apartment and get to know the people that are now my new neighbors. I mean, because you're not going to make them move, right? The people have spoken. And this is something that has been, I think, in the works for a while. Put together by organizations that have wanted to see more of this liberation from these unjust systems. And now is the time that they sprung it forward, because this is the catalyst that was needed. So if you don't go too far into conspiracy theories about us versus them, and you look at people through a heart chakra place where you're actually looking from the heart center, the third eye, and also the crown chakra, then you can really understand what's really going on. And you can move past the conspiracies and actually understand, oh, this is a spiritual consequence of choices of America and the policymakers and all this that has been endured for a few ages now, and this is something that we need to correct, and this is something that I do feel that is happening. Ashley, Sweden has made a lot of great progress in their reform system, and the US could really learn from them. Absolutely agree. Sweden and New Zealand is another one. So Middle Earth itself, right, from the movies, can really teach America something. And I'll admit, sometimes it's really hard for me to be an American, because I do feel that I belong somewhere where those systems are already in place, because America is really far behind. In fact, Britain, 30 years prior to America, actually ended color segregation. And for some reason, it took America 30 more years to not end theirs. So even from our neighbors overseas, America was still behind in many ways. It is because of, kind of a white supremacist that has been within our country for a while. And we have seen it where they've taken over the place of Native Americans within this country. We have seen that. We have seen these types of systems be established and ingrained in America for a very long time. And it is time now to really break those down. And that's what we're seeing as happening. Samantha Lewis, I feel that there's a lot of anger and fear about in the Black mixed community. I'm seeing it in my son, who just doesn't trust the police at all after witnessing and experiencing awful racism. And that is the sad thing. Yes, it's that consequence, right? Because police are fearful too. I mean, what do we have is like fear against fear. And fear comes out in other ways of anger, of revenge, of defensiveness. Yes, it's about having more of a truer soul to soul connection. When you are out there in the public, you need to really perceive through the heart of a person, or you have to really know them. And I do believe that this is something that can be actually now tested with the highly sensitive person test, but maybe reworded. Maybe I'll work on that. I don't know. But maybe it's something already being in the works. Who knows? But I definitely agree that, yes, fear is like the number one problem. I'll say this. When I watched the videos of George Floyd and also of Raynard Brooks, what strikes me is that you can't read racism within a person, okay? You cannot read their personal experience or biasness. But what you can read in a person is fear. And why? Because that comes from the vibration frequency chart that I shared before. It is a lower form of vibration that you can actually sense in people. And it is just an animalistic, instinctual response that comes from a feeling of separation and division. We have some work to do, right? Roxanne, agreed. The US needs to admit that we are not the best. We are not the best. Absolutely not. No, America has a lot of growing up to do. And they can really take some examples from some of these other nations that are starting to, I guess, be more progressive in their ways of doing things. Mary Preston, what are some tips that you have in using your third eye and heart chakra when it comes to different situations in life to bring people together, even if you can't be neutral all the time? That's a really great question. I would say that the best thing that I have found, a practice that I have found that works, is that the third eye and even the heart chakra, that idea. Okay, so from the heart all the way to the divine crown chakra is the area of neocortex. That's your higher mind that is stimulated by music, by art, by poetry, by things that move you and touch you in a spiritual sense. You know, it's a spiritual experience sometimes for people, or it can be an emotional one. The heart is emotional, and as you get higher, it's more spiritual. So the reactive mind comes from the lower chakras. And because fear and those instinctual responses happen, it is based on too quick of a response. And this is something that has been ingrained in early humans in many ways, because when they saw animals, they had to fight or flight, right? So it's about taking a pause and allowing yourself to get to that higher place. Because if you react too quickly, you're moving from the lower place of your emotions. If you give yourself a pause, what I do is I count. I'm like, 1,002, 1,003. I give myself 5 seconds, and then I respond to my husband now. Or then I respond. Because what I have found is that if you try to come back immediately, you are responding from the emotional center of, and not even emotional, but the strictly instinctual center. That's the reptilian mind. So if you allow yourself that time, you actually then raise up, and then you can reach more of that sense of logic and spiritual perception. So I would say time in between responses can really help you if you cannot consciously stay neutral or objective about personal situations all the time, because I know that can be hard. But at least you can give yourself time to get to that place of the third eye, because for some people it's not an instant response. But eventually what happens as you practice more using the heart chakra, using the third eye, using the divine crown chakra, the more you practice, the more instantaneous it becomes. It's part of you. So if you're not there yet consciously aware of yourself with that already engaged, then give yourself that time to allow yourself the thoughts of the neocortex, the higher mind, to engage itself. I think that's the best way to do it if you can't, force yourself or push yourself to stay objective. Samantha, unfortunately, we still have a lot of neo-Nazis in the UK. Oh, that's a shame too, right? Yeah, white supremacy groups are actually very big around the world. And I would just say it is because of the age, and in the terms of, it is probably the first type of supremacy group that was formed based on the Caucasian. And then now what's happening is we have minorities that have entered into these nations, or the white settlers have taken over the Native Americans' land. And so, these are the larger groups because they have existed, I think, longer. And now the white supremacist groups have to dissolve. They have to dissipate. We have to speak up and say, this is not right. This is not spiritually aware. This is not spiritually conscious. This is not even accurate in terms of intelligently or logically understanding the situation. So that is a very difficult idea. That is the challenge. How do we actually move past the hurdle of the white supremacy groups that are reacting from a place of ignorance, but also maybe their own personal experience that is colored through fear and generalization? Because here's the thing about personal experience. We all know that we've had a personal experience, and yes, that person enters into our life, and maybe it was a negative experience, but we should not then equate that to all people of that color or culture or ethnicity based on that one person, that one personal experience. This is the real problem with racists, is that they're not opening their mind to not generalize. And this is a form of ignorance, and the more friendships that they have of other people of different cultures and nations, the less racist they become. I'm very fortunate to have grown up in a urban society that is very, very diverse. And I was not raised to see color as a problem or anything. So I think that this is also has to do with your family bloodlines and how you are raised. But we as conscious, aware beings of this inequality and injustice, we need to be the ones that, I guess, keep voicing our opinions, keep letting people know that this is actually inaccurate of cosmic law. It's going against some universal truths and values. And maybe it will awaken people, in a way. And we can only come from the place of love and understanding. Because if we come from a place of hate and aggression, we're only going to get that pushback. So we have to do it in a way that's peaceful, love, understanding. And yeah, it's a difficult situation, but I think that we are watching it unfold in the way that it's supposed to. And we just have to hold on tight, because it is a bumpy road, but we're going to get there together. Roxanne Victor, meditating regularly on the heart chakra and the violet third eye helps to strengthen it. Exactly. Yes. Meditation daily is how you get to that objective voice. So if you can't stay neutral, that's because your mind is they call it the monkey mind. The monkey mind is not able to comprehend neutrality or non-duality. And meditation on a regular practice actually gets you to that non-duality place, the objective eye of the universe in many ways. So when you engage daily meditation, you do strengthen that cord, between the objective eye and the subjective experience. Vaughn, I had a vision of the white supremacy coming out the woodwork full force. Yeah, they're definitely going to start, and this is something that we just have to keep on voicing our opinions. But what we're seeing is that because of this symbol of brotherhood that is being shown, or in sisterhood, the idea of whites and blacks coming together in peaceful protests that we're seeing, it's a very strong force to push against that other type of force. Love is a greater force than fear or ignorance, spiritual darkness. So that spiritual awareness, that light of awareness is far more stronger. And that's what I have seen push back those forces. But yeah, it is something that is a possibility. So I would say that your vision is definitely tapping into a possible future. Mary Preston, thanks for answering my question. I love you. I wish there were some fellow Palladian elves here in Colorado. Oh my gosh. I know. I love it when we are able to connect like this and really understand each other. So love to you as well. And Colorado is absolutely beautiful. I've been to Colorado Springs, and I would love to live there. It's a gorgeous place. And maybe one day we can have an elven sanctuary there for you to go and visit. That is what I'm hoping with this organization that I helped co-found. Let's see. Roxanne Victor, the greatest ancient societies were a dark-skinned people: ancient Egypt, Africa, Mongolia, and Sumer. Yeah, we do. We need to see these people. We need to see these people. That's what they're doing too, is they're seeing themselves before they were put into chains, and this is about them arising to their power, because this was a terrible mistake. This was a complete mistake in history. But through that process is this path of awakening to the truth. So in some ways, it is something that had to happen, but we should frown down upon it and never allow it again, to learn from it and to grow from it. And yes, and I am not mad at my Black community that is engaging themselves in that Afrocentric power that is really important to get in touch with once again. Naren, maybe we should revert to the old peace pipe. I agree. Yes. Oh my gosh. Samantha Lewis, the energies are so chaotic and heightened at the moment. The meditation is a real struggle recently. Yeah, it's hard to keep focus. It is. Just keep at it. If it helps you, it always helps me to sit out in the backyard in nature and just listen to the sounds around, because with meditation, it's about being aware of everything around you, yet the emotional response and the chatter within your mind is not important. It is just being observant about your surroundings. So it really helps me to meditate in nature because of that element of it. Roxanne, agreed. We can learn a lot from all Indigenous cultures. who are still close to the earth. Yes, we absolutely can. The peace pipe, the idea of the tribal community is something that I think that humans are starting to revere and respect once again. It's hard because we are in these hugely, very populated, dense cities and nations, but we can still have an element of that tribal community mentality. And of course, connecting back to nature will help us. Roxanne, I have been affected by the chaos lately, so I just meditate more. Yeah, take time for yourself. What I do is I take breaks. I like to absorb the information. I like to stay on top of things and understand what's happening. But at the same time, I listen to the music that I enjoy. I watch movies that are uplifting. I spend time with myself. I overindulge in me time that is not resonating or is not a vibrational match to what's going on in the world. So I become separate. It is like what the Buddha says, be in the world, but not part of the world. And if that can help you, just keep that motto, it really helps me. I am in the world, but I'm not part of what makes the mess. I am observing it from a place of understanding, of compassion. This is the place of what the Buddha spoke about, which is what enlightenment is. And when we get to this place, we can become more observant in our nature rather than reactive. But I'm reactive right now because I think that this is a time where I can help be a co-creator with others, as we are all part of this collective. And you are co-creators with me right now, putting forth your ideas. So I'm so happy that you joined me tonight. And I do hope that whoever has the ability to get the idea across of the highly sensitive person, empathic abilities in our police reform, that it gets to the right people. And I will try to do what I can as well. But everyone have a lovely night. I hope to see you on my video tomorrow if you get a chance, where I will have a movie chat with you all. But thank you all for joining in. And I'm so happy to be surrounded by like-minded people, but also those who have different opinions. You are also welcome to my channel as well. I just ask that you be respectful of everyone while you are here, and always kind, because this is a place where I make a safe space and a haven for those that may be considered not normal or outliers, as that psych exam suggested. Hearing voices is not always an indication that you have a problem. You might be hearing things that others may not be able to yet. So everyone, have a wonderful evening. Peace, love, unity to you all.